My father looked at my 80-year-old grandfather shivering in his wheelchair, then looked me dead in the eye and slammed the heavy oak door in our faces. It was Christmas Eve, 5 degrees below zero, and we had just been evicted from our own family dinner. As the snow settled on my eyelashes, I thought we had lost everything. I thought we were broken. What I did not know, and what my father definitely did not know, was that the shivering old man beside me was not a burden. He was a secret billionaire with a real estate portfolio worth $4.2 billion. And he was about to teach my father a lesson that money cannot buy. Before I continue this story of the coldest night and the sweetest revenge, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to protect you. My name is Zara. At 29 years old, I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to a father who only spoke the language of status. Growing up, my father Marcus was obsessed with appearances. He was a mid-level executive who spent money he did not have to impress people he did not like. This Christmas was supposed to be his masterpiece. He had rented a sprawling 12-bedroom mansion in the most expensive district of Atlanta just to host the Huntington family. The Huntingtons were old money, the kind of wealthy white family that owned banks and country clubs, and my father was desperate to marry my younger brother Dion into their lineage. I pulled up to the rented mansion in my 10-year-old Honda, the engine sputtering as I parked behind a line of leased luxury SUVs. I walked around to the passenger side to help Grandpa Otis. The winter wind was biting, cutting right through my coat. Grandpa Otis sat there, wrapped in his favorite faded wool coat, the one with the patch on the elbow. He looked frail, his hands trembling slightly as I lifted him into his wheelchair. He was the only person in this family who had ever loved me unconditionally. While my father and brother chased clout, Grandpa and I spent our weekends volunteering at the community shelter. We made our way up the long, perfectly shoveled driveway. Through the massive bay windows, I could see the chaos inside. It looked like a movie set. My father was running around in a $3,000 tuxedo, screaming at the catering staff. My brother Dion was lounging on a velvet sofa, scrolling on his phone, completely useless. I pushed the front door open, struggling to maneuver the wheelchair over the high threshold. The warmth of the house hit my frozen cheeks, smelling of pine needles and expensive roasted duck. But the moment we crossed the threshold, the temperature in the room dropped faster than the air outside. My father froze. He dropped the crystal vase he was adjusting and stormed over to us. His face was not filled with holiday joy or welcome. It was twisted with pure, unadulterated horror. He did not even look at me. His eyes were glued to Grandpa Otis's faded coat and the scuffed wheels of his chair. "What are you doing?" Marcus hissed, his voice low and dangerous. He looked around frantically to make sure the catering staff were not listening. "I told you to come at 6. It is 5:30. And look at him. Look at this mess." I brushed the snow off my shoulders and stood tall. "Hello to you too, Dad. Merry Christmas. We are early because the heater in my car died and Grandpa was freezing." Marcus did not care. He grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and yanked it back, almost tipping Grandpa out. I instinctively grabbed his arm. "Don't you dare touch him," I snapped. My father slapped my hand away. "Look at what he is wearing, Zara. I sent you $500 to buy him a suit. A proper suit. He looks like a homeless person. He looks like a beggar. The Huntingtons are going to be here in 20 minutes. Do you understand what that means? They own half the city. If they see this, if they see that, my father looks like he crawled out of a dumpster. The wedding is off. The deal is off. Everything I have worked for is gone." Grandpa Otis looked up, his eyes watery but sharp. "I like this coat, Marcus. It is warm." "Shut up, old man," my father spat back. "You do not get to speak. You are here because I am a benevolent son who doesn't want you to rot in a nursing home, not because I want you here." I felt the heat rise in my chest. My father stood there, smelling of expensive cologne and desperation, looking at the man who raised him with absolute disgust. "Dad, stop it," I said, my voice shaking with anger. He is your father, and this is Christmas. Who cares what the Huntingtons think? If they judge us for having an elderly grandfather, they are not worth impressing. My father laughed a cold, humorless sound. That is why you are a loser, Zara. That is why you work for a nonprofit making pennies while Dion is about to marry into millions. You think small. You think like a peasant. I am trying to elevate this family, and you two are anchors dragging me down. He looked at the front door, then back at the kitchen. He grabbed the wheelchair again. You are not staying in the living room. Absolutely not. He pushed Grandpa roughly across the polished marble floor, the wet wheels leaving streaks of mud and melting snow. I ran after him. Marcus pushed the wheelchair through the swinging doors into the kitchen where the chaos of the catering staff was in full swing. The air was thick with steam and the clatter of pans. He shoved Grandpa into a tight corner near the garbage disposal behind a stack of crates. You stay here, Marcus ordered, pointing a manicured finger at Grandpa's face. You do not come out. You do not speak to the guests. You do not wheel yourself into the hallway to get a drink. If you need water, drink from the tap. He turned to me, his eyes wide and manic. And you? You are the help tonight. I told the Huntingtons you are just a distant cousin who needed work. Do not correct them. You make sure he stays quiet. If he makes a mess, you clean it up. I looked at my father, really looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the terror in his eyes that someone might discover he came from humble beginnings. Dad, I said quietly, you are ashamed of us. I am ashamed that you have no ambition, he corrected, straightening his bow tie in the reflection of the microwave. I am ashamed that I have to hide my own family because you refuse to look the part. Suddenly, a melodious two-tone chime echoed through the massive house. The doorbell. My father jumped as if he had been shot. He checked his watch. They are early. He smoothed his jacket and fixed a fake bright smile on his face. He leaned in close to me, his breath hot in my ear. Listen to me, Zara. One sound. If I hear one cough, one squeaky wheel, or one word from either of you that embarrasses me, I will throw you both out into the snow, and I won't let you back in. Do not test me. He spun around and marched out of the kitchen, letting the swinging door slap shut in my face. I stood there in the fluorescent light of the kitchen, surrounded by strangers in catering uniforms who looked at us with pity. I looked down at Grandpa. He was brushing a piece of lint off his old coat. He looked up at me and winked. Don't worry, sweet pea, Grandpa whispered, reaching into his pocket. Let them have their appetizers. The main course is going to be very hard for them to swallow. I held my breath as the heavy front door creaked open. From the kitchen, through the small circular window in the swinging door, I could see them. The Huntingtons had arrived. They swept in like royalty, visiting a peasant village wrapped in furs and cashmere that cost more than my entire college tuition. Mrs. Huntington was inspecting the foyer chandelier with a critical eye, while Mr. Huntington barely acknowledged my father's eager handshake. And then there was Courtney. She looked flawless in a white silk dress that clung to her frame, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of gold. But her eyes were cold, scanning the room not with appreciation, but with calculation. My father was practically bowing to them, his laughter too loud, his posture too rigid. He was performing for his life. In the kitchen, the air was thick with tension. The catering staff moved silently around us, eyes averted, trying to pretend they did not see the old man in the wheelchair and his granddaughter hiding in the corner like fugitives. A kind young waiter had slipped Grandpa a small bowl of tomato soup, and he was eating it with shaking hands, trying to warm himself up after the freezing cold outside. I adjusted his collar, my heart aching as I saw a shiver run through his frail body. I just wanted this night to be over. I just wanted to get him home. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. The noise of the party surged in for a brief second before being cut off again. I spun around. It was Courtney. She stood there holding an empty wine glass, her blue eyes narrowing as they landed on us. She did not look surprised to see people back here. She looked annoyed that we were breathing the same air. She stepped forward, her high heels clicking sharply on the tile floor, a predator closing in on wounded prey. The scent of her expensive perfume, something heavy and floral, instantly overpowered the smell of the food. "So this is the help Marcus mentioned," she drawled, her voice dripping with disdain. She looked me up and down, sneering at my simple sweater and jeans. "And who is this?" She pointed a manicured finger at Grandpa Otis. I stepped between her and Grandpa. "This is my grandfather Otis, and I am Zara Marcus's daughter." Courtney let out a short, cruel laugh. "Oh, right, the black sheep. Dion told me about you, the one who works with the poor people." She shook her head, turning her attention back to Grandpa. He was still holding the warm bowl of soup, looking up at her with confused, watery eyes. Courtney took a step closer, invading his personal space. She wrinkled her nose, making a show of being disgusted. "God, what is that smell? It smells like a nursing home and mothballs. It is making me nauseous." She reached over, pretending to reach for a bottle of water on the counter behind him. As she moved, her hip bumped hard against Grandpa's arm. It was not clumsy. It was deliberate. I saw the shift in her weight, the intentional shove. "Oops," she said flatly. The bowl of hot tomato soup flew from Grandpa's trembling hands. It splashed all over his chest, soaking into the old wool coat and splashing onto his neck. Grandpa gasped in pain, dropping the spoon as the red liquid stained everything. "Oh my God!" Courtney shrieked, jumping back as if she were the one who had been burned. "Look what you did, you clumsy old fool! You almost got that filth on my white silk dress." Grandpa was trying to wipe the hot soup off his neck, wincing. "It burns," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Zara, it burns." I saw red. The fear I had felt moments ago evaporated, replaced by a white-hot rage that started in my toes and exploded in my chest. I did not think about the consequences. I did not think about the billionaires in the other room. I only saw this entitled, cruel woman standing there, worried about her dress, while my grandfather was in pain. "You did that on purpose," I said, my voice shaking, not with fear but with fury. Courtney rolled her eyes, checking her hem for spots. "Don't be dramatic. He shouldn't be here anyway. Look at him. He looks like a trash bag someone forgot to take out to the curb. Honestly, it is doing him a favor. Maybe the soup will cover up the smell of poverty." That was it. The tether snapped. I took one step forward and swung my hand with every ounce of frustration, hurt, and anger I had held back for 29 years. My palm connected with her cheek with a sound like a cracking whip. It was loud, sharp, and satisfying. Courtney's head snapped to the side. She stumbled back, clutching her face, her eyes wide with shock. For a second, there was absolute silence in the kitchen. Even the chef stopped chopping. Then Courtney screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that shattered the atmosphere. The kitchen doors burst open. My father Marcus was the first one through, followed by Dion and the Huntingtons. My father looked from Courtney, who was sobbing fake tears, and pointing at me, to Grandpa, covered in soup, and finally to me, standing with my hands still tingling. "She hit me," Courtney wailed, throwing herself into Dion's arms. "That animal attacked me. I was just trying to help the old man, and she slapped me." My father did not ask what happened. He did not look at his own father, who was wiping tomato soup from his stinging skin. He did not ask me for my side of the story. He saw his golden ticket to wealth, crying, and he saw the daughter he despised standing tall. Marcus crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand and backhanded me across the face. The force of the blow knocked me sideways. I tasted blood. I grabbed the counter to steady myself, my ear ringing. "You ungrateful little wretch," my father hissed, his face purple with rage. He immediately dropped to his knees, not to check on me, but to grab a napkin and frantically dab at the invisible spots on Courtney's dress. "I am so sorry, Courtney. I am so sorry. She is mentally unstable. We were just about to have her committed." He stood up, grabbing me by the arm so hard his fingers dug into my muscle. He dragged me toward the back door, kicking Grandpa's wheelchair to get it moving. "Get out!" he roared. "Dad, please!" I choked out, wiping the blood from my lip. "It is freezing. Grandpa is wet. He will get hypothermia." "I don't care if he freezes into a block of ice," Marcus screamed, shoving the wheelchair through the back service door. The blast of winter air hit us like a physical blow. The snow was falling harder now, a white curtain of cold. My father shoved me out into the snow, causing me to stumble and fall onto the icy concrete. He looked down at us, framed by the warmth and light of the kitchen, looking like a demon guarding the gates of hell. "You are dead to me, Zara. You and this useless old man. Do not come back. Do not call. If I see your face again, I will call the police and have you arrested for assault." He grabbed the handle of the heavy steel door. "Dad, wait!" I cried out, reaching for him. "You made your choice," he spat. "Now live with it." He slammed the door shut. The lock clicked with a finality that echoed in the frozen night. We were alone. I looked at Grandpa. The hot soup on his coat was already turning cold, freezing against his chest. We were in the middle of a blizzard miles from home with no coats, no car keys, and no family left. I crawled over to Grandpa, wrapping my arms around him to share body heat, sobbing into his wet shoulder. I thought this was the end. I really did. But then I felt Grandpa's hand on my back. He was not shaking anymore. He was calm. "Dry your tears, Zara," he said, his voice cutting through the wind. "Reach into the lining of my right armrest." I looked at him confused. "Grandpa?" "Do it," he commanded gently. My fingers fumbled with the torn fabric of his old chair until I felt something cold and metallic. I pulled it out. It was a phone. But not just any phone. It was heavy with gold inlays and a satellite antenna. "Press the green button," he said, staring at the closed door of the mansion with a look of pure cold calculation. "It is time to call the cavalry. It is time they learn who they just threw out into the cold." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind. It did not sound like the wavering, cracked voice of the grandfather I had been caring for over the last 5 years. It sounded strong, deep, resonant. I looked up, blinking through my tears. Grandpa Otis was looking down at me, but his eyes were not watery or confused anymore. They were clear, sharp, and burning with an intensity I had never seen before. He was sitting up straighter. The tremor in his hands was gone. "Zara, listen to me," he said, squeezing my hand with a grip that was surprisingly firm. "Stop crying. Tears are for people who have no options, and we have plenty of options." "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" I stammered, confused by his sudden change in demeanor. "You are freezing. You are confused. We need to find shelter." He shook his head slowly. "I am not confused, Sweet Pea. I have never been clearer. For 10 years I played the part of the frail, poor old man because I wanted to see who in this family actually had a heart. I wanted to know who loved Otis the man and not Otis the wallet. Tonight my own son gave me his answer. And you gave me yours." He reached down to the right armrest of his battered second-hand wheelchair. The fabric was torn and frayed, held together by duct tape. I watched mesmerized as he dug his fingernail into the seam of the armrest and ripped the fabric open. Underneath the dirty padding and foam was a sleek black panel, and in the center of that panel sat a single golden button. It glowed faintly as if powered by an internal source. "Grandpa," I whispered, pulling back. "What is that?" Grandpa looked at the mansion where the silhouette of my father could be seen raising a toast in the window. Then he looked back at me with a smirk that was terrifyingly confident. "This," he said, "is the end of their world." He pressed the gold button. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the wind and the snow. I thought maybe he was delusional after all. But then the ground began to vibrate. It started as a low hum deep in the earth and grew louder. Then lights appeared at the end of the long driveway. Not the yellow dim headlights of a taxi or a tow truck. These were piercing blue-white beams of high-intensity LED light that cut through the blizzard like lasers. One pair of lights, then two, then three. Three massive black vehicles glided up the driveway, moving with a silent predatory grace. They were enormous. As they got closer, the light from the mansion illuminated the silver hood ornaments. The spirit of ecstasy, Rolls-Royces. Three Rolls-Royce Phantoms entirely blacked out, moving in perfect formation. I scrambled back, almost falling into a snowbank. My mouth fell open. I had never seen one of these cars in real life, let alone three. They stopped perfectly in sync, just inches from where we stood. The doors of the lead car flew open before the wheels even stopped rolling. Four men in immaculate black suits and earpieces jumped out. They did not look cold. They moved with military precision. They opened umbrellas, instantly creating a canopy over Grandpa and me, shielding us from the snow. A tall man with silver hair and the posture of a refined butler stepped out of the second car. He walked straight to Grandpa Otis, ignoring the mud and the slush ruining his polished shoes. He bowed low, a deep, respectful bow that lasted a full 3 seconds. "Chairman Otis," the man said, his voice smooth and professional. "We received the distress signal. I apologize for the delay. The weather conditions required us to reroute the convoy." Grandpa Otis waved a hand dismissively. "It is fine, Winston. Just get my granddaughter out of the cold." Winston turned to me. "Madame." He gestured to the open door of the Rolls-Royce. The interior glowed with warm, ambient light. The seats looked like they were made of clouds. I stood frozen, looking from the car to my grandfather, in his rags, then back to the car. "Grandpa," I stuttered. "Whose cars are these? Who are these people?" Grandpa Otis leaned forward as two bodyguards gently lifted him from his wheelchair. They did not struggle. They handled him like he was made of porcelain and diamond. "They work for me," Zara, Grandpa said, settling into the plush leather seat of the Phantom. "Or rather, they work for OZ Holdings, my company." One of the bodyguards folded the old wheelchair. "Toss it," Grandpa commanded. "Winston, bring the heater." Winston draped a cashmere blanket over my shoulders and guided me into the car next to Grandpa. The warmth hit me instantly. It smelled of rich leather and safety. Winston leaned into the car window, his face serious. "Sir, the helicopter is on standby at the private airfield. The pilot is ready for takeoff. Where shall we take you tonight? Do you wish to go to the Hamptons estate to rest, or straight to the penthouse in Manhattan?" I looked at Grandpa. He was rubbing his hands together, warming up. He looked out the tinted window at the house where my father lived, the house where he had been treated like garbage for years. His eyes narrowed. "Take us to Manhattan." "Winston," Grandpa said, his voice cold as ice. "Call the legal team. Wake them up. I don't care what time it is. I want a full audit of my son's company on my desk by morning." He turned to me, and for the first time that night, he smiled a genuine, dangerous smile. "We are going to the city, Zara. I need to teach my son a lesson about what money really looks like. And trust me, it is going to be a very expensive lesson." The interior of the Rolls-Royce Phantom was quieter than a library and warmer than a summer day. I sat frozen in the hand-stitched leather seat, staring at the crystal champagne flute that Winston, the silver-haired butler, had just placed in my trembling hand. Outside the tinted windows, the frozen world where I had been standing just minutes ago blurred into streaks of light. My grandfather sat opposite me. He had shed the tattered wool coat that my father had mocked. Underneath, he wore a crisp white shirt, and Winston was currently helping him into a midnight blue velvet blazer that looked like it cost more than my car. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Is this real? Are we dreaming? Did we die in the snow?" Otis chuckled, a deep, rich sound that filled the cabin. "We are very much alive, Zara. In fact, we are more alive than we have been in 10 years. He leaned forward, pouring himself a glass of sparkling water. "I know you have questions. You deserve answers. You see, everyone thinks I was just a carpenter. And I was. 50 years ago, I laid bricks, I poured concrete, but I also bought land. When Atlanta was just dirt roads and potential, I was buying every corner lot I could afford. When New York was recovering in the 80s, I was there buying distressed properties for pennies on the dollar. He took a sip, his eyes darkening slightly. But money changes people, Zara. It acts like a magnifying glass. It shows you who people really are. When your grandmother passed away 10 years ago, I saw the greed in Marcus's eyes. He did not cry for his mother. He asked about the will. He asked about the life insurance. That was the day I decided to die. Or at least the billionaire Otis decided to disappear. I created OZ Holdings to manage my assets blindly, and I became just Otis, the retired frail old man with a bad hip and a fixed income. I stared at him, tears pricking my eyes again. So the last 10 years. The small apartment, the coupon clipping, the bus rides. It was all a test. It was a filter, he corrected gently. I wanted to see who would care for me when I had nothing to offer but my company. Marcus failed. Dion failed. They saw a burden. But you, Zara, you saw a grandfather. You came every Sunday. You cut my hair. You bought me medicine with your own small salary. You never asked for a dime. You passed the test a long time ago, sweet pea. I just stayed in character because I wanted to see how far Marcus would go. Tonight he showed me. He showed me he is willing to throw his own blood into the snow for the sake of appearances. The car slowed down. We had arrived in Manhattan. The convoy pulled up to a private entrance of the tallest, most imposing glass skyscraper in the city, the Spire. I knew this building. Everyone knew this building. It was the playground of the ultra-rich. We did not go through the lobby. We took a private elevator that moved so smoothly, I did not even feel it rising. When the doors opened, my breath caught in my throat. We were in the penthouse. It was a palace in the sky. The walls were made of floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a 360-degree view of the glittering New York skyline. The floors were heated marble. Art that I had only seen in textbooks hung casually on the walls. A Picasso, a Basquiat. It was $85 million of pure, unadulterated power. "Welcome home," Otis said, wheeling himself out of the elevator. He did not need help anymore. On the smooth floors of his own empire, he moved with speed and precision. He led me past a grand piano and a sunken living room to a massive office at the far end of the apartment. The desk was made of mahogany wide enough to land a plane on. Behind the desk stood a steel wall safe taller than me. "Winston, the files," Otis commanded. Winston appeared from nowhere, placing a thick leather binder on the desk. Otis placed his palm on the scanner of the safe. It beeped and hissed open, revealing stacks of gold bars, bonds, and documents. But Otis ignored the gold. He picked up a simple blue folder from the binder Winston had brought. "Come here, Zara. Look at this." I walked around the desk, my legs feeling like jelly. I looked at the documents spread out before me. They were loan agreements, mortgages, business credit lines. I recognized the company logo at the top of the debtor column. M.J. Enterprises, my father's company. "Your father likes to pretend he is a self-made tycoon," Otis said, his voice dripping with irony. "But the truth is, he is a gambler. He leverages everything. He borrows from Peter to pay Paul. Last year, he needed a massive injection of cash to keep his company afloat and to rent that ridiculous mansion for the wedding. He applied for a loan from a private equity firm called Centurion Capital." I looked closer at the paperwork. "And Centurion Capital is a wholly owned subsidiary of OZ Holdings." Otis finished, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "He borrowed $5 million from me, Zara. He just doesn't know it. He thinks he borrowed it from a faceless corporation. He put up everything as collateral. His company, his future earnings, even the lease on his car." Otis slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel. "He is technically in default as of yesterday. I was going to give him a grace period. I was going to be kind. But after he left us to freeze, Otis reached into the safe again. He pulled out a small, sleek black box. He opened it and slid it across the mahogany desk toward me. Inside sat a card. It was made of black titanium. Heavy. Cold. It had my name engraved on it. Zara Jenkins. Next to it was the logo of OZ Holdings. "This is the Centurion card," Otis said softly. "It is not just a credit card. It is a key. It gives you direct access to the family trust and executive decision-making power over our subsidiaries, including Centurion Capital." I picked up the card. It felt electric in my hand. It felt like a weapon. Otis looked me dead in the eye. "From tomorrow morning, you are the new acting director of Centurion Capital. You are the one holding his leash. You are the one who decides if we extend his loan or if we call it in and crush him." He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "So, Director Zara, what do you want to do with your father's company?" I looked at the card, then at the view of the city below, and finally at the reflection of myself in the dark glass. I didn't look like the shivering girl in the snow anymore. I looked like someone who finally had the power to fight back. I slid the card into my pocket. "I want to go to the wedding, Grandpa," I said, my voice steady. "And I want to give him a wedding present he will never forget." The sun rose over Manhattan the next morning, turning the steel and glass of the skyline into pillars of fire. For the first time in 29 years, I did not wake up worrying about rent, or my car breaking down, or how I would afford groceries. I woke up in sheets made of Egyptian cotton that felt like silk against my skin. But there was no time to luxuriate. Grandpa Otis was already up sitting on the terrace with an espresso and the Financial Times. He had told me that today was about transformation. If I was going to dismantle my father's ego, I had to look the part. I had to look like someone who could buy and sell him without blinking. By 8 a.m., the penthouse was buzzing. Winston had summoned a team of personal shoppers and stylists from the most exclusive boutiques on Fifth Avenue. These were not the kind of people who asked you what your budget was. They were the kind of people who told you who you were going to be. I stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror as they went to work. They stripped away the Zara who shopped at discount racks. They took away the scuffed boots and the pilling sweaters that smelled of anxiety and secondhand smoke. In their place, they built armor. First came a tailored suit from a Milanese fashion house cut so sharp it could draw blood. The fabric was a deep midnight navy wool that absorbed the light. Then a pair of stiletto heels that added 3 inches to my height and changed the way I stood. My spine straightened, my chin lifted. When the stylist finished with my hair, pulling it back into a sleek, commanding bun that highlighted my cheekbones, I stared at my reflection. I did not recognize the woman staring back. The fear was gone from her eyes. The hesitation was gone from her posture. She looked dangerous. She looked expensive. She looked like a CEO. Winston nodded approvingly from the doorway. "You look like your grandmother, Miss Zara." She was a force of nature, too. I was just adjusting the cuffs of my blazer when my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. The screen lit up with a picture I had forgotten to change. It was a photo of my father and me from my college graduation, one of the few times he had smiled at me. But the name flashing on the screen made my stomach tighten out of habit. Dad. For a second, the old Zara wanted to panic. The old Zara wanted to apologize. But then I felt the weight of the Centurion card in my pocket. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and swiped answer. I did not say hello. "You finally picked up?" Marcus barked. His voice was hoarse, probably from screaming at catering staff all night. "Do you have any idea what time it is? Do you have any idea the damage control I had to do last night after you and that senile old fool made a scene?" I walked over to the window, looking down at the city. The cars looked like ants. People like my father looked even smaller. "Good morning to you too, Marcus," I said, my voice cool and steady. "Don't you take that tone with me," he snapped. "Listen, I am going to give you one chance. Just one. Courtney is distraught. She says she feels threatened. She says she cannot focus on her wedding day because she is afraid you will come back and assault her again. I almost laughed. The image of Courtney, the pampered heiress who threw hot soup on an old man feeling threatened by me, was absurd. So here is the deal. Marcus continued, his voice dropping to that patronizing register he used when he thought he was being generous. You are going to come back to the house today. You are going to apologize to Courtney, on your knees if you have to. You are going to tell the Huntingtons that you are off your medication and that you are seeking help. And then during the wedding, you are going to help the serving staff. We are short a few waiters, and it is the only way you can make yourself useful. I listened to his demands, letting the silence stretch out. He really believed he still held the cards. He really believed that his approval was the oxygen I needed to breathe. Are you listening to me, Zara? He shouted. If you don't do this, if you don't fix this, I am cutting you off completely. No more contact, no more family gatherings. You will be an orphan. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw the power suit. I saw the skyline. And I realized that being an orphan from his toxic family was not a punishment. It was a liberation. I will be at the wedding, Marcus. I said, my voice dropping an octave. I will be there, and I will bring a gift that none of you will ever forget. Good, he huffed, clearly misinterpreting my compliance. And the apology. Oh, there will be an apology, I said. Someone will definitely be sorry. But let me be clear, I won't be the one kneeling. I hung up before he could respond. I tossed the phone onto the desk and sat down in the leather executive chair. It was time to get to work. Grandpa Otis had given me the login credentials for OZ Holdings and by extension the access to the internal audits of all our subsidiaries. I pulled up the file on MJ Enterprises, my father's company. The numbers danced across the screen. At first glance, it looked like a standard failing business. Declining revenue, bloated overhead, excessive spending on client entertainment. But then I saw something strange. I narrowed my eyes, leaning closer to the monitor. There were a series of monthly withdrawals listed under consulting fees. They were irregular amounts, $5,000 here, $12,000 there. Last month it was $20,000. I clicked on the transaction details. The money wasn't going to a consulting firm. It was being routed through a shell company, but the digital footprint was sloppy. Whoever was moving this money wasn't a professional embezzler, they were an amateur. I traced the IP address of the transfers. It originated from a residential address. I typed the address into the search bar. It was my father's house. My heart began to race. Was Marcus stealing from his own company to hide money from the creditors? It was possible, but then I looked at where the money ended up. The destination accounts were all linked to offshore platforms, not banks, gaming platforms, poker stars, BetMGM, crypto casinos. I cross-referenced the dates of the withdrawals with my family's calendar. The biggest withdrawal, $50,000, happened 3 days ago. The same day my brother Dion had posted a photo on Instagram of a new Rolex he claimed was a gift from the Huntingtons. I sat back in the chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. It wasn't Marcus. Marcus was too obsessed with his credit score to gamble on crypto. It was Dion, the golden child, the heir apparent, the boy who could do no wrong. He was siphoning money out of his father's dying company to fund a gambling addiction. He was stealing the very loan money that my grandfather had provided. I tapped the screen, highlighting the transactions. This was it. This wasn't just dirt. This was a nuclear bomb. Dion was about to marry into a banking family, a family that prized financial prudence above all else. If the Huntingtons knew their future son-in-law was an embezzler and a degenerate gambler, the wedding would not just be cancelled, it would be an execution. I printed the documents. The printer hummed, spitting out the pages that would destroy my brother's life. I stacked them neatly in a pile. I picked up the first page and held it up to the light. I had my first weapon, and God help them, I was going to use it. 2 hours later, My father walked into the downtown branch of Centurion Capital like he owned the building. Through the security feed on my laptop screen in the penthouse, I watched him adjust his silk tie in the reflection of the glass doors. He looked composed to the outside world, the very picture of a successful businessman, but I knew better. I zoomed in on his hands. They were trembling. He was sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. He walked straight past the line of customers and approached the receptionist's desk, flashing that charming fake smile that had fooled people for decades. "I am here to see Gary Marcus," announced, leaning casually on the counter. "Tell him it is Marcus. He is expecting me. We have some paperwork to sign for the extension." The receptionist did not smile back. She did not reach for the phone to call the branch manager. Instead, she looked down at a typed memo on her desk, then back up at him with professional indifference. "Mr. Gary Wilson is no longer handling your account, sir," she said coolly. My father's smile faltered. "What do you mean? Gary and I play golf every Sunday. I just spoke to him yesterday. Stop playing games and get him out here. I am in a hurry." "I am afraid that is not possible," she repeated, her voice void of emotion. "Your file has been flagged for immediate review by the Risk Assessment Division. You have been directed to Conference Room B. The Vice President of Asset Recovery will speak with you remotely." I watched the color drain from his face. Asset recovery. That was the polite banking term for collections. That was the department you got sent to when the bank stopped being your friend and started becoming your executioner. He tried to argue, blustering about his reputation and threatening to take his business elsewhere, but the security guard took a step forward. My father, realizing he was making a scene, straightened his jacket and marched toward the conference room. Inside the soundproof glass room, he sat alone at the long table. I sat in my grandfather's office miles away, wearing a headset with a voice modulation software running. I took a sip of water, signaled to Grandpa Otis, who was watching with a gleam in his eye, and pressed the button to activate the speaker in the conference room. I kept the camera off. To him, I was just a black screen, Mr. Jenkins. A digitally deepened, distorted voice filled the room. "Thank you for joining us." My father jumped. He looked at the black screen, clearly unnerved. "Who is this? Where is Gary? I don't appreciate being treated like a delinquent. I have been a loyal customer for 20 years. Loyalty does not pay the principal balance." "Mr. Jenkins," I said, enjoying the way he flinched at the coldness of the voice. "I am the new acting director of this division. We have been reviewing the financials of MJ Enterprises. To be frank, the numbers are alarming. You are leveraged to the hilt, your liquidity is non-existent, and yet you are currently hosting a wedding that is estimated to cost $300,000. My father's face turned a deep shade of red. "How I spend my personal money is none of your business. The company is fine. We just have a cash flow issue. I need the extension on the credit line to bridge the gap until the next quarter. It is standard procedure." "Gary promised me." "Promises made by previous management are not binding," I interrupted. "And regarding your personal spending, it becomes our business when you use company assets as collateral. According to the loan agreement you signed 5 years ago, your primary residence, the mansion on Peachtree Lane, is listed as security against the business loan." He swallowed hard. He knew that, but he never thought anyone would actually call him on it. "So, here is the situation," I continued, leaning into the microphone. "We are exercising our right to accelerate the debt. We are recalling the full amount of the loan. You currently owe Centurion Capital $2.1 million. "This is outrageous," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You can't do that. I have 30 days' notice. I have rights." "Actually, you don't," I countered calmly, shuffling the papers on my desk, just so he could hear the sound. "Section 4, paragraph C of your contract states that if the lender suspects insolvency or misappropriation of funds, we can demand immediate repayment. And we have evidence of both." Silence. Absolute silence in the conference room. "We are giving you 48 hours, Mr. Jenkins. $2 million. If the funds are not wired to our account by noon on the day after tomorrow, we will initiate foreclosure proceedings on your home. We will seize the property, evict the occupants, and sell it at auction to recoup our losses. But he stammered, his arrogance completely gone, now replaced by pure panic. But the wedding. The wedding is in 3 days. The reception is at the house. You can't take the house. My future in-laws, the Huntingtons, they will see the eviction notices. It will ruin me. That sounds like a personal problem, I said, channeling every ounce of coldness he had shown me the night before. Perhaps you should not have spent so much money on appearances if you could not afford the foundation. 48 hours, Mr. Jenkins. Or you will be homeless. I cut the connection before he could beg. I watched on the screen as he sat there for a full minute, staring at the blank monitor, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then he scrambled up, knocking his chair over, and ran out of the bank. I switched feeds. I did not have cameras inside his house, but I had access to the GPS tracker on his car, another asset technically owned by the company. I watched the little dot race through the city streets, breaking every speed limit. He was heading home. He was heading to his only perceived lifeline. In my mind, I could see exactly what was happening next. I knew the layout of that house better than anyone. I knew he would burst through the front door, bypassing the confused servants, and head straight for the game room where Dion spent his days. Back at the mansion, the scene played out exactly as I anticipated. My father threw open the door to the game room. Dion was lounging on the leather sofa, playing video games, a half-eaten sandwich on his chest. He didn't even look up when Marcus stormed in. "Turn it off!" Marcus screamed, ripping the power cord out of the wall. "Hey, Dion!" yelled, sitting up. "I was on a level, boss." "What is your problem? We are in trouble," Marcus panted, loosening his tie as he paced the room frantically. "The bank. They are calling the loan. They want $2 million in 2 days, or they take the house." Dion laughed nervously. "You are joking, right? Just call your friend Gary." "Fix it." "Gary is gone," Marcus roared. "There is no Gary. There is only a foreclosure notice. We need cash, Dion. We need liquid cash right now." He grabbed Dion by the shoulders, shaking him. "Listen to me. The wedding cannot be cancelled. If we lose this house before the wedding, the Huntingtons will know we are frauds. We need to sell everything." Marcus looked around the room, his eyes darting wildly. "Your car. The Porsche. We can get maybe 80,000 for it fast. And the watch. The Rolex Courtney's father gave you as an engagement gift. That is worth 50,000. Give it to me." Dion froze. His face went pale. He pulled his arm back, covering his wrist with his sleeve. "Give me the watch," Dion, Marcus shouted, holding out his hand. "We will sell it and buy a fake one to replace it. No one will know. We need every penny." Dion didn't move. He looked at the floor, beads of sweat forming on his upper lip. "I can't, Dad." "What do you mean you can't?" Marcus was hysterical now. He lunged forward and grabbed Dion's wrist, yanking the sleeve up. The wrist was bare. There was no gold Rolex, no diamond bezel, just pale skin. "Where is it?" Marcus whispered, his voice trembling with a new kind of fear. "Where is the watch?" Dion pulled away, backing up against the wall. I lost it. At the gym. Someone must have stolen it from my locker." "Don't lie to me," Marcus screamed. "You never go to the gym. Where is the watch? And where are the keys to the Porsche?" Dion started to cry. Not the fake manipulative tears he used to get his way, but real tears of terror. "Dad, please. I thought I could win it back. I had a system. It was a sure thing." "Win what back?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The money," Dion sobbed. "I needed money for the bachelor party. I took a loan against the car title. And the watch. I sold it to a guy in Jersey. I put it all on Black Dad. I thought I could double it. I thought I could help you pay for the wedding." Marcus stumbled back as if he had been physically struck. He collapsed onto the sofa, staring at his golden child. "You sold the car. You sold the gift from the Huntingtons." "I lost it all," Dion wailed, sliding down the wall to the floor. I lost it all last night. I don't have $1, Dad. I owe bookies another 50 grand. If I don't pay them, they said they are coming to the wedding to break my legs. The room fell into a horrified silence. My father sat there, the weight of his entire life collapsing on top of him. No money, no assets, a son who was a thief and a gambler, and a deadline of 48 hours before the world found out he was a fraud. Miles away in the penthouse, I took off my headset. I looked at the stack of gambling records on the desk. This was just the beginning. The money was gone. Now it was time to take away their dignity. The afternoon sun reflected off the polished glass doors of the flagship Tiffany store on Fifth Avenue. I adjusted my oversized designer sunglasses and stepped inside. The air conditioner hummed with a scent of expensive perfume and old money. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like an intruder in a place like this. I walked across the plush carpet, my heels clicking with a rhythm that demanded attention. I was not here to browse timidly. I was here to find a retirement gift for Grandpa Otis, something timeless to replace the cheap watch he had worn for 20 years to maintain his cover. I was examining a platinum chronograph in a private viewing case when the peaceful atmosphere shattered. I heard a high-pitched laugh that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a laugh I knew better than my own name. It was Courtney. I stiffened but did not turn around. In the reflection of the glass display case, I saw them. Courtney and her mother, Mrs. Huntington, were sweeping through the entrance like they owned the building. They were flanked by two sales associates who were practically bowing as they walked. Courtney was pointing at things, randomly demanding to see trays of diamonds, treating the staff like personal servants. I tried to focus on the watch, hoping they would move to the bridal section on the second floor. But luck was not on my side. Courtney's eyes scanned the room and landed on me. Or rather, she landed on the diamond-encrusted necklace that the associate had just placed on the velvet tray next to the watch I was viewing. "Oh my God, Mom! Look at that!" Courtney squealed, pointing directly at my station. "That is the exact necklace I wanted for the rehearsal dinner. It matches my earrings perfectly." She marched over her mother, trailing behind her, with a look of bored entitlement. Courtney did not recognize me. With my hair pulled back in a sleek bun, the dark sunglasses covering half my face, and the $3,000 navy suit, I looked nothing like the girl she had covered in soup the night before. To her, I was just an obstacle. She reached over my shoulder, her manicured hand snatching the necklace right off the velvet tray before I could even pick it up. "Excuse me," she said to the sales associate helping me, ignoring my presence entirely. "Why is this out here? I told your manager to put the eternity collection aside for me. I am a Huntington. We have an account here." The associate, a young man named Pierre, who had been very polite to me until this moment, looked nervous. He glanced at Courtney, then at Mrs. Huntington, and finally at me. He saw two women he recognized from the society pages, and one woman he didn't know. The calculation in his eyes was instant and disappointing. "I am so sorry, Miss Huntington," Pierre stammered. "I didn't realize. This lady was just looking at it." "Looking is free," Courtney scoffed, dangling the $50,000 necklace from her finger. "But buying is a different story. And frankly, I don't think she looks like a buyer. She looks like a personal shopper or an assistant." She turned to me, a smirk playing on her lips. "You don't mind, do you? I am getting married this weekend, and this is essential. You can find something in the silver section downstairs. It is much more affordable." Mrs. Huntington chuckled. "Yes, run along, dear. Let the adults talk business." I felt a familiar heat rising in my chest, but this time it wasn't shame. It was amusement. I slowly turned to face them, keeping my expression neutral behind the dark lenses. I was not finished viewing, that I said, my voice low and controlled. "Please put it back." Courtney blinked, surprised that the assistant was talking back. "Excuse me, do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," I said. "You are a woman with bad manners and a fiancé who gambles away his inheritance." The color drained from Courtney's face. Mrs. Huntington gasped. Pierre, the sales associate, looked terrified. How dare you? Mrs. Huntington hissed. Pierre, get the manager. Immediately. I want this person removed from the store. She is harassing us. The manager, a tall man with a thin mustache named Mr. Sterling, hurried over. He had clearly sensed the disturbance in the force of his wealthy clientele. What seems to be the problem, ladies? Mr. Sterling asked, clasping his hands. This woman is refusing to give up the necklace I reserved, Courtney lied smoothly, putting on her victim voice. And she just insulted my family. I want her gone. If she stays, the Huntingtons will never spend another dime in this establishment. Mr. Sterling turned to me. His face hardened. Miss, I am going to have to ask you to leave. We value our VIP clients and we cannot have you disturbing them. Please step away from the counter. I did not move. I stood my ground, feeling the Centurion card burning a hole in my pocket. So that is how it works? I asked Mr. Sterling. You kick out the quiet customer to please the loud one just because of their last name. Mr. Sterling sighed, looking at his watch. Miss, please. Don't make me call security. You are clearly out of your element here. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I reached up and slowly took off my sunglasses. Hello, Courtney? Hello, Mrs. Huntington. Courtney dropped the necklace. It landed on the velvet tray with a soft thud. Her eyes went wide, darting from my face to my suit, then to the shoes. She looked like she was trying to solve a complex math equation and failing. Zara, she whispered. What? What are you wearing? Did you steal that? Mrs. Huntington squinted at me. The cleaning girl. Marcus's daughter. What on earth are you doing here? Are you following us? I ignored them. I turned my attention to Mr. Sterling, who was looking very confused. Mr. Sterling, I said, keeping my voice calm, but raising the volume just enough so the other shoppers could hear. My name is Zara Jenkins. I represent OZ Holdings. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black titanium card. I placed it gently on the glass counter. It made a heavy metallic clink that sounded like a gavel striking a sound block. Mr. Sterling stared at the card. His eyes bulged. He knew what that card was. It was the Centurion, but not just the regular black card. It was the business tier, the kind with no spending limit, the kind that invited you to private islands. I want to make a purchase, I said, tapping the card with my index finger. Mr. Sterling swallowed hard. Of course, Miss Jenkins. What? What would you like to see? The necklace. No, I said, looking at Courtney, who was staring at the card with a mixture of greed and fear. I don't want the necklace. I want the collection. The collection, Mr. Sterling stammered. The entire Eternity collection, I clarified. Every necklace, every bracelet, every ring. I am buying it all, right now. The room went silent. Courtney's mouth fell open. Mrs. Huntington grabbed her daughter's arm for support. Pierre looked like he was about to faint. That is over $4 million of inventory. Miss Jenkins. Mr. Sterling breathed, his hands shaking slightly. Is that a problem? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Or do I need to call my grandfather Otis and tell him his favorite jewelry store declined his money? No, Mr. Sterling yelped. No, absolutely not. We would be honored. He reached for the card, but I covered it with my hand. There is one condition, I said, my voice turning to steel. Anything, Mr. Sterling said, sweating now. I looked at Courtney. She looked small. She looked cheap in her expensive dress. I will complete this purchase only if you agree to institute a lifetime ban on these two individuals. I pointed directly at Courtney and her mother. What? Courtney shrieked. You can't do that. They are loud. I continued, speaking only to the manager. They are disruptive. They harass paying customers. And frankly, they lower the brand value of this establishment. I want them escorted out immediately, and I want their names flagged in your system globally. If I ever see them in a Tiffany store again, I will pull my business. And trust me, my business is worth a lot more than theirs. Mr. Sterling looked at the $4 million sale in front of him. Then he looked at Courtney, who was red-faced and screaming. It was not a difficult choice. Capitalism has no loyalty, only interests. Mr. Sterling straightened his tie and turned to the Huntingtons. Ladies, he said, his voice firm, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You have got to be kidding me, Mrs. Huntington yelled. Do you know who my husband is? I know who this card belongs to. Mr. Sterling said, gesturing to the black titanium. Security. Two burly guards in black suits stepped forward. They did not bow this time. They took Courtney and Mrs. Huntington by the elbows. Get off me, Courtney screamed, as she was dragged toward the revolving doors. Zara. You will pay for this. You are dead. I watched them go. Watched as they were unceremoniously dumped onto the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue in front of a crowd of tourists. I turned back to the counter where Mr. Sterling was already punching numbers into the terminal. Wrap it up, I said, putting my sunglasses back on, and throw in that men's watch. I have a wedding to attend. The rehearsal dinner was held at the St. Regis, a venue so opulent it made my father's rented mansion look like a shack. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears, and the air smelled of lilies and desperation. I arrived 20 minutes late, a power move I had learned from Grandpa Otis. I was not driving my Honda tonight. I stepped out of a blacked-out Rolls-Royce Phantom, the flashbulbs of the society photographers popping like fireflies. They did not know who I was yet, but they knew money when they saw it. And tonight I looked like money. My dress was a custom emerald silk gown that hugged every curve, a sharp contrast to the plain, oversized clothes I used to wear to hide myself. My hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, and around my neck sat the diamond necklace from the Eternity collection, the very one Courtney had tried to snatch from me earlier. I walked past the security checkpoint, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was tense. I could see my father Marcus circulating the room with a manic energy. He was laughing too loud, drinking too fast. He had managed to secure this venue at the last minute, likely using the cash he got from the loan sharks after the bank cut him off. He was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, and he had no idea I was the one holding the scissors. Mr. Huntington was standing near the bar, looking bored. He was a man who only cared about two things: his bank balance and his golf handicap. Grandpa Otis had arranged my entry perfectly. A quick call to an old associate meant that tonight I was not Zara Jenkins, the unwanted daughter. I was ZJ, the representative of a private equity firm looking to acquire mid-sized banks. Mr. Huntington had been begging for a meeting with my firm for months. I approached the group. My father was currently bragging to Mr. Huntington about his imaginary real estate portfolio. And of course, we are looking to expand into the European market next quarter, Marcus was saying, swirling his scotch. The opportunities in London are just too good to pass up. Mr. Huntington nodded politely, his eyes scanning the room for someone more important. Then he saw me. His eyes widened. He tapped my father on the shoulder. Marcus, quiet down. Mr. Huntington whispered, I think that is her. That is the investor from OZ Holdings. My father turned around. He looked right at me. For a second time, stopped. I waited for the recognition. I waited for him to scream, to point, to call security, but he didn't. He looked at my face, at my eyes, the same eyes he had looked into for 29 years, and he saw nothing. He saw the expensive dress, he saw the diamonds, he saw the power, but he did not see his daughter. It was the ultimate insult, and yet it was the ultimate disguise. He straightened his tie and put on his most obsequious smile. Good evening, madame, he said, bowing slightly. I am Marcus Jenkins. It is an honor to have you here. I extended my hand, my expression cool and detached. I did not smile. Mr. Jenkins, I have heard a lot about you. He beamed clearly, thinking his reputation preceded him in a good way. Only good things, I hope. Please allow me to introduce my son, Dayon. He is the groom and the future of our family enterprise. Dayon stepped forward. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and he was sweating through his tuxedo. He shook my hand with a clammy grip, his gaze darting around the room as if he expected a bookie to jump out from behind the curtains. "Pleasure," Dion mumbled. We moved to the table. I was seated in the place of honor right between Mr. Huntington and my father. Courtney sat across from me. She was staring at my necklace with a look of intense jealousy, but she didn't recognize me either. To them, Zara was a mousy, poor girl with frizzy hair and cheap clothes. This woman, this ZJ, was a titan. The waiter poured the wine. It was a vintage Bordeaux costing $500 a bottle. My father raised his glass for a toast. To family, Marcus announced, his voice booming. To legacy. To the union of two great houses. I raised my glass, watching him over the rim. "It is interesting you mention legacy, Mr. Jenkins," I said, my voice smooth and low. "In my research of your company, I noticed some discrepancies in the family trust. I understood you had other dependents." The table went quiet. Courtney stopped chewing. Dion dropped his fork. My father stiffened. He took a long sip of wine, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I am not sure what you mean." I swirled the red liquid in my glass. "Rumors, mostly. I heard you had a daughter, and a father who lives with you. I was hoping to meet them. I admire men who take care of their elders." Marcus let out a short, nervous laugh. He waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, that. You have been misinformed, I am afraid. Sad business, really." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a tragic secret. "I did have a daughter once, and a father, but they are no longer with us." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked, gripping the stem of the wine glass so hard I thought it might snap. "They passed away." Marcus lied, his face arranging itself into a mask of fake sorrow. "A car accident, years ago. It was a terrible tragedy. My father was a good man, but he was troubled. And my daughter, well, she had her own demons. It was a dark time for the family. But we persevered. Now it is just Dion and me. We are the survivors." I stopped breathing. I stared at him. This man who had raised me. This man who had thrown me out into the snow just 24 hours ago. He had not just erased me from his life, he had erased me from existence. He had killed me off to save face in front of a potential investor. Dion nodded along, taking a huge gulp of wine. "Yeah. Real sad. We miss them every day." Courtney chimed in, eager to be part of the conversation. "It was heartbreaking. Marcus is practically a saint for how he handled it. He is so strong." I felt the rage rising in my throat like bile. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that I was sitting right there, that his father was alive and richer than he could ever dream of being. I wanted to shatter his lie into a million pieces. But I didn't. I forced my hand to relax. I took a slow sip of the expensive wine. It tasted like blood. I set the glass down with a deliberate click. "That is truly tragic, Mr. Jenkins," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I hate to hear about wasted potential. But I suppose some branches of the family tree need to be pruned for the others to flourish." "Exactly," Marcus said, relieved that I bought his story. "You understand business. You understand that sometimes you have to cut your losses." He smiled at me, a smile of complicity. He thought we were the same. He thought we were both sharks. He had no idea. I checked my watch. It was almost time. I had one more card to play tonight, one more little push to send them over the edge before the grand finale at the wedding. I turned to Mr. Huntington. "By the way, sir, I received an interesting email this morning regarding the groom's financial standing. I think you should see it." I signaled to the waiter, who handed a tablet to Mr. Huntington. On the screen was the video I had prepared. It wasn't the gambling video yet. No, I was saving that. This was a video of Dion at a nightclub 2 nights ago, bragging to a stripper that he was only marrying Courtney for her daddy's money so he could pay off his debts. I watched Mr. Huntington's face turn purple. I watched Courtney lean over to see the screen. I watched the color drain from Dion's face as he realized his private confession was now public property. I stood up, smoothing my silk dress. "If you will excuse me," I said to the stunned table. "I have an early morning. But I will see you all at the wedding. I have a feeling it is going to be an event to die for." I walked away as the shouting started behind me. I didn't look back. I just walked out into the cool night air where the Rolls-Royce was waiting. One lie down. 1,000 truths to go. I walked to the edge of the ballroom, standing in the shadows where the light from the crystal chandeliers could not reach me. I watched them. The happy family. My father Marcus was clinking his glass against a spoon, signaling for silence. He was about to give a speech that was undoubtedly filled with lies about honor and integrity. But I was not going to let him speak. I reached into my clutch and pressed the send button on my phone. A single message to Winston, who was waiting in the control booth. Execute. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. A spotlight hit the massive projection screen behind the head table. Everyone turned, expecting to see a montage of childhood photos or a romantic slideshow of Courtney and Dion. My father smiled, adjusting his tie, thinking this was a surprise gift from the wedding planner. But it was not a slideshow. Static hissed through the speakers, loud and jarring. Then an image flickered into focus. It was grainy black and white footage time-stamped 48 hours ago. The location stamp in the corner read, "The Diamond Flush Casino Staff Exit." The room went dead silent. On the screen, my brother Dion was not looking like the polished groom sitting at the table. He was a mess. His shirt was torn, his face was bruised, and he was on his knees in a dirty alleyway. Standing over him were two large men with thick necks and baseball bats. "Please." Dion's voice cracked through the ballroom speakers, shrill with terror. "Please, Rocco, I just need a little more time. The wedding is on Saturday. Once I am married, I will have access to everything." "Everything," one of the thugs grunted. "You owe us 50 grand, kid. I can get you more than that." Dion sobbed on screen, grabbing the thug's pant leg. "Listen to me. My father-in-law is Charles Huntington. He runs the biggest private bank in the state. I have seen where he keeps his passwords. I can get you the client list. I can get you the security codes to the vault. Just don't break my legs, please. I will sell them out. I will give you whatever you want." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a sound of pure shock. I looked at the head table. Mr. Huntington was no longer looking bored. His face had turned a deep, violent shade of purple. He was gripping the tablecloth so hard his knuckles were white. He slowly turned his head to look at Dion, who was sitting next to him, frozen in absolute horror. Courtney dropped her wineglass. It shattered on the floor, red wine staining her white dress like a gunshot wound. On the screen, the video ended with Dion kissing the thug's shoes. Then the screen went black. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Then Mr. Huntington stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You little rat!" Mr. Huntington whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "You are going to sell my client list to the mob." Dion snapped out of his trance. He jumped up, knocking his chair over. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, looking for a scapegoat. He looked at the screen, then at his father, and finally his eyes landed on me, standing in the back. But he didn't see me. He saw a ghost. "It is fake," Dion screamed, his voice cracking. "It is not real. It is AI. It is a deep fake." He ran toward Mr. Huntington, hands outstretched. "Charles, you have to believe me. I never said that. I have never been to that casino. Someone is trying to frame me. It is technology. They can make anyone say anything these days. Who?" Mr. Huntington roared, pushing Dion away. "Who would spend the money to create a fake video of you selling me out to criminals?" Dion scrambled for an answer. He looked at Marcus. My father was pale, sweat streaming down his face. He knew it was real. He knew his son was a gambler. But Marcus Jenkins was a survivor. and survivors throw anyone under the bus to save themselves. It is Zara, Marcus shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the empty air, desperate to deflect the blame. The room murmured. Who is Zara? Someone whispered. It is my daughter. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength as he constructed the lie. The one I told you about. The one who died. But she is not dead. I lied to protect you all. She is alive and she is sick. She is jealous. She has been stalking us. She hates Dion because he is successful. She hates you, Charles, because you represent everything she failed to be. He turned to Mr. Huntington, putting a hand on his chest. Charles, I am so sorry. My daughter Zara. She is mentally unstable. She works in tech. She knows how to do these things. She created this fake video to ruin this wedding because she cannot stand to see us happy. That is why I cut her off. That is why I said she was dead. Because to me, the girl who would do this to her own brother is dead. I stood there, hidden by the dim light, listening to my father destroy my character to save his own skin. He was painting me as a villain, a stalker, a tech genius sociopath. He was using my name, the name he had forbidden me to speak in his house, as a shield to protect his golden child. Dion latched onto the lie like a drowning man. Yes. Yes, it is Zara. She sent me threatening texts. She said she would destroy me. She made this video. Look at the pixels. It is fake. I love you, Courtney. I would never betray your family. Courtney looked unsure. She wanted to believe him. She wanted the fairy tale to continue. She looked at her father. Daddy, maybe they are right. You know how crazy people can be. Mr. Huntington hesitated. He looked at Marcus, who was nodding vigorously, the picture of a heartbroken father. I stepped forward. My heels clicked on the parquet floor. The sound cut through the murmuring crowd. I walked out of the shadows and into the pool of light in the center of the room. That is a fascinating story, Mr. Jenkins, I said, my voice calm, projecting to every corner of the room. Everyone turned to look at me, the mysterious investor. ZJ. My father looked at me, confusion in his eyes. He wiped the sweat from his brow. Madame ZJ, I am so sorry you had to witness this family tragedy. Please ignore this. It is just a bitter, estranged relative trying to cause trouble. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. You say this video is a deepfake created by your unstable daughter, Zara? I asked, taking a slow step toward the head table. Yes, Marcus insisted. She is capable of anything. And you say she is doing this because she is jealous of your success and your son's integrity. Absolutely, Marcus said, regaining his confidence. She has always been the black sheep. I reached up and slowly unpinned the intricate chignon in my hair. The dark locks fell around my shoulders, framing my face. I took off the heavy diamond earrings. I wiped the dark lipstick from my mouth with the back of my hand. I looked at him. I really looked at him. Marcus squinted. He tilted his head. Dion stopped breathing. Interesting, I said, dropping the investor accent and using my own voice, the voice he had silenced for 29 years. Because if Zara is the one making the video, then who is standing right in front of you? My father's eyes went wide. His jaw dropped. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Zara, he whispered. I laughed. A dry, cold sound. Hello, Dad. Hello, Dion. It is amazing how much a $3,000 suit and a little confidence can change a person. You didn't even recognize your own daughter across the dinner table. That is how little you ever looked at me. Dion pointed at me, his hand shaking uncontrollably. It is her. See? I told you. She is here. She is the one doing this. I turned to the crowd, addressing the hundreds of guests. My brother and father are right about one thing. I am Zara. And I did bring that video, but I didn't make it. I didn't need to use AI to make Dion look like a criminal. He did that all by himself. I turned back to Mr. Huntington. You want proof it is not a deepfake, sir? Deepfakes don't come with bank transfer records. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my clutch. This is a transaction record from the OZ Holdings secure server. It shows a transfer of $50,000 from Marcus Jenkins's business account to an offshore gambling site. The transfer was authorized by Dion Jenkins. The IP address matches the Wi-Fi at your house, Marcus. I threw the paper onto the table. It landed right in front of Mr. Huntington. And one more thing, I said, looking at Dion, who was now trembling so hard his teeth were chattering. That video was taken 48 hours ago, but I have another one. Would you like to see what your fiancé was doing last night while you were sleeping, Courtney? Dion screamed. No, don't. Please. I smiled. Winston, play the next clip. The morning of the wedding did not begin with birds singing or soft sunlight filtering through the curtains. It began with a scream that shattered the windows of the bridal suite on the top floor of the Plaza Hotel. It was Courtney. I was sitting in the lobby cafe sipping an espresso and watching the chaos unfold on the hotel security feed on my tablet. It was cruel, perhaps, but after 29 years of being treated like a stain on their perfect reputation, I felt entitled to a little entertainment. Courtney was standing in the middle of the room wrapped in a silk robe, her face a mask of absolute horror. The dress rack that was supposed to hold her $50,000 custom Vera Wang gown was empty. In its place hung a plastic garment bag with a note attached. I zoomed in on the screen. The note was from the bridal boutique. It read simply, "Order canceled due to payment failure. Please find enclosed a floor sample as a courtesy replacement." No! Courtney shrieked, tearing the plastic bag open. Inside was a dress, but it was not the white silk masterpiece she had ordered. It was a sample size from 3 seasons ago. The lace was yellowed from age, the hem was frayed, and there was a distinct red wine stain on the bodice where a clumsy customer had spilled a drink years ago. It was a dress fit for a garage sale, not a society wedding. My mother, she wailed, throwing the dress on the floor. Fix this. Call them. Tell them I will sue them into oblivion. Mrs. Huntington was on the phone, her face pale. I can't reach them, Courtney. The line is dead. And the bank? The bank just declined the emergency transfer I tried to make. They say our accounts are frozen pending a federal audit. Courtney collapsed onto the bed, sobbing. I cannot wear this rag. I will look like a pauper. Everyone will laugh at me. Down in the lobby, the situation was even more volatile. My father, Marcus, was pacing back and forth near the grand fountain. He looked like a man on the edge of a nervous breakdown. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that was already soaked. He was waiting for the cash infusion he had promised the hotel manager, but instead of a bank courier, 3 large men in ill-fitting leather jackets walked through the revolving doors. I recognized them immediately. They were the men from the video, the loan sharks. Marcus froze. He tried to make himself small behind a potted palm, but it was too late. The lead thug, a man with a scar running down his cheek, spotted him. He smiled, revealing a gold tooth, and started walking toward my father with a heavy, purposeful stride. Marcus did not think. He did not try to negotiate. He turned and ran. He sprinted across the polished marble floor, his tuxedo tails flapping behind him like the wings of a panicked crow. He pushed past a group of bewildered tourists and ducked into the men's restroom near the elevators. I switched the camera feed to the hallway outside the restroom. The thugs stopped at the door laughing. They didn't go in. They just stood there, arms crossed, guarding the exit. They knew he had nowhere to go. They were willing to wait. Inside the bathroom, Marcus locked himself in the furthest stall. I could imagine him sitting there on the closed toilet lid, knees pulled up to his chest, trembling in the dark. The great Marcus Jenkins, the man who claimed to be a tycoon, was hiding in a public bathroom to avoid getting his legs broken on his son's wedding day. It was pathetic, and it was exactly what he deserved. While my father cowered in the dark, the automatic doors of the main entrance slid open again. This time, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted. The air seemed to get cleaner. The lights seemed to get brighter. Grandpa Otis rolled in. He was not wearing the tattered coat or the old blanket anymore. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit in a shade of charcoal gray that shimmered under the lights. A silk cravat was tied loosely around his neck. His silver hair was groomed to perfection. He sat in his wheelchair not like an invalid but like a king on a throne. Behind him walked Winston and two other bodyguards carrying briefcases that looked heavy with intent. Grandpa Otis scanned the lobby. He saw the thugs guarding the bathroom. He signaled to Winston. Winston nodded and walked over to the men. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull a weapon. He just whispered something in the lead thug's ear and handed him a small business card. The thug looked at the card, then at Otis, and his face went white. He tapped his partners on the shoulder, and the three of them practically ran out of the hotel, leaving a cloud of confusion in their wake. The path was clear. Grandpa Otis rolled his chair toward the bathroom door just as it cracked open. Marcus, thinking the coast was clear, peeked his head out. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked, and there was fear in his eyes. When he saw Otis, the fear instantly turned into rage. He needed a target. He needed someone to blame for the hell his life had become in the last 24 hours. And here was his father, the man he had thrown away like trash. "You," Marcus hissed, stepping out of the bathroom. He stormed toward the wheelchair, his fists clenched. "You are the reason this is happening," Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings of the lobby. "You and that ungrateful daughter of mine. You cursed me. You brought your bad luck and your poverty to my doorstep, and now everything is falling apart." People in the lobby stopped to watch. A bride was crying in the elevator. Thugs were at the door. And now a man in a tuxedo was screaming at an elderly man in a wheelchair. "Get out!" Marcus screamed, raising his hand as if to strike. "How dare you show your face here? I told you to die. I told you to disappear. You are a stain on this family. You are nothing but a useless, broken old beggar." He lunged forward, intending to push the wheelchair over, intending to hurt the only man who had ever truly loved him. But his hand never made contact. Before Marcus could touch him, a figure blur of motion intercepted him. It was not a bodyguard. It was Mr. Dubois, the general manager of the Plaza Hotel. Mr. Dubois, a man known for his icy demeanor and absolute authority, grabbed Marcus's wrist in midair. He twisted it sharply, forcing Marcus to step back with a yelp of pain. "Do not touch him," Mr. Dubois said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. Marcus stared at him, rubbing his wrist. "Mr. Dubois, thank God you are here. This man, this intruder, he is harassing me. He is a trespasser. Have security throw him out. I pay you thousands of dollars to keep riffraff like this out of my sight." Mr. Dubois looked at Marcus with a mixture of pity and disgust. Then he turned his back on Marcus entirely. He faced Grandpa Otis. And then in front of the entire hotel staff, in front of the guests, and right in front of my father's wide, unbelieving eyes, Mr. Dubois straightened his suit jacket and bowed. It was a deep, respectful bow, bent at the waist, a gesture reserved for royalty or heads of state. "Good morning, Chairman Otis," Mr. Dubois said, keeping his head lowered. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Chairman Marcus whispered the word, feeling foreign in his mouth. Mr. Dubois straightened up. "We were not expecting you until next month for the board meeting, sir. But it is an honor to have you. Is everything to your satisfaction? I apologize for the disturbance. We were just about to remove this unruly guest." He gestured to Marcus. My father looked from the general manager to the old man in the wheelchair. He looked at the Italian suit. He looked at the bodyguards. And for the first time, he really looked at the eyes of his father. Otis did not look away. He stared at his son with a gaze that could cut glass. "No, Mr. Dubois," Otis said, his voice calm and commanding. "Do not remove him yet. He has a wedding to attend, and I want him to have a front-row seat for the show I am about to put on." Marcus took a stumbling step back, his legs hitting a luggage cart. He looked like he was about to vomit. Chairman Marcus choked out, You own the hotel." Otis smiled. It was a shark's smile. "I don't just own the hotel, Marcus. I own the ground you are standing on. I own the bank that holds your mortgage, and as of this morning, I believe I own you. The grand ballroom doors swung open with a heavy, ominous creak that sounded less like a welcome and more like the ceiling of a tomb. The wedding march began to play, played by a string quartet that looked terrified after witnessing the scene in the lobby. I sat in the front row, the seat usually reserved for the mother of the groom, a spot my father had left empty in honor of his fake grief. But today, I filled it. I sat with my back straight, my emerald silk dress shimmering under the lights, and my hands folded calmly over a thick leather portfolio in my lap. My father Marcus was operating on pure delusion. After the encounter with Grandpa Otis in the lobby, his mind had simply snapped. He had convinced himself that if he just got through the next 20 minutes, if he just forced the rings onto fingers and signed the marriage license, everything would magically fix itself. He believed that the vows would act as a shield against the bankruptcy, the mobsters, and the truth. He was practically dragging Courtney down the aisle. And Courtney looked tragic. The sample dress she had been forced to wear was ill-fitting, tight in the hips and loose in the bust, with that faint red wine stain on the bodice visible to anyone with sharp eyes. She was not glowing. She was fuming. Her face was blotchy from crying, and she walked with a stiff, jerky rhythm, her eyes darting around the room, as if she expected the FBI to jump out from behind the flower arrangements. Dion stood at the altar looking like he was facing a firing squad rather than a bride. He was sweating so profusely that his collar was already soaked through. He kept patting his pocket, checking for the rings, or maybe checking to see if his phone was still blowing up with threats from his bookies. The guests were not smiling. They were whispering. The air was thick with gossip. They had seen the video of Dion in the alleyway. They had seen the police cars outside. They knew this was not a celebration. It was a crime scene in progress. But they stayed because wealthy people love a disaster as long as it is not happening to them. Marcus deposited Courtney at the altar and took his place beside Dion. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes glazing over me, refusing to acknowledge my presence. He was humming to himself a low, manic sound. Just get it done. Just get it done. The minister, a man who clearly wished he was anywhere else, cleared his throat. He opened his book with trembling hands. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice wavering slightly. We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. I watched Dion flinch at the word holy. There was nothing holy about this union. It was a transaction, a merger of debts and lies. The minister rushed through the opening remarks, skipping the usual anecdotes about love and commitment. He could feel the tension in the room. He wanted to get to the vows, get his check, and leave before the police arrived. If there is anyone here present, the minister said, looking down at his book, rather than at the congregation, who can show just cause why these two should not be legally joined, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. It is the moment in every movie where the music swells and the drama peaks. In real life, usually there is just an awkward silence. But not today. The silence that filled the room was heavy, electric. Marcus closed his eyes, praying. He was mentally willing the minister to move on. He was counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds. I wanted them to think they were safe. I wanted them to exhale. Then I stood up. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. I didn't shout. I didn't wave my arms. I just stood there, towering over the seated guests in the front row. I object, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and carried to the back of the room without a microphone. Marcus's eyes snapped open. Dion looked like he was going to faint. Courtney spun around her veil, whipping across her face. At first, they didn't process who I was. They saw the expensive dress, the diamonds, the hair. They saw ZJ, the investor. Miss ZJ. Marcus stammered, stepping forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Please, this is a misunderstanding. Whatever you have heard, we can discuss it after the ceremony. This is a private family moment. I reached up and slowly removed the diamond pins from my hair, letting it fall loose around my face. I wiped the remaining makeup from my eyes. I tilted my head looking at him with the same expression I used to have when I was 10 years old, and he would scold me for reading too much. "It is a family moment, Dad," I said, dropping the formal tone. "That is exactly why I am standing." The recognition hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled back, gripping the altar rail for support. "Zara?" he gasped. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. "Is that the daughter?" someone whispered. "The dead daughter. The stalker." Courtney's face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. She didn't care about the plot twist. She didn't care about the drama. She only knew that the person she considered a peasant was ruining her moment. "You?" Courtney shrieked, her voice cracking. "You are the one from the store. You are the one who slapped me." She pointed a shaking finger at me, her face turning purple. "Security!" she screamed, stomping her foot like a toddler. "Security! Get in here! Get this trash out of my wedding!" Two confused security guards stepped forward from the back of the room. They looked at me, then at the hysterical bride. "She is a beggar!" Courtney yelled, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "She is a nobody. She is just a jealous poor little rat trying to ruin my life. Throw her out into the street where she belongs." My father found his voice. "Yes, do as she says. Remove this woman. She is trespassing. She is mentally unstable." The guards moved toward me. The guests held their breath. This was it. The humiliation. The public shaming. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just slowly lifted the leather portfolio I had been holding. I opened it, pulling out a sheaf of documents stamped with the official seal of the city and the bank. I turned to the security guards. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through Courtney's screaming. "Before you touch me, you might want to check who signs your paychecks." The guards hesitated. They stopped 10 feet away. I turned back to Courtney and my father, holding the documents high so everyone could see the gold-embossed letterhead of OZ Holdings. "You want to throw me out, Courtney?" I asked, taking a step toward the altar. "You want to throw out the trash?" I took another step. "Well, this trash just bought the mortgage on your father's house this morning. And this trash owns the debt that Dion used to buy your ring. And most importantly, as of 10 minutes ago," I slammed the portfolio shut with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. "This trash owns the Plaza Hotel." I looked at the security guards. "I am the new owner of this building, and I don't recall giving permission for a wedding to be held in my ballroom." I turned back to Courtney, whose mouth was hanging open, her eyes wide with terror. So I asked, smiling coldly, "Who exactly are you planning to throw out? Because it looks to me like you are the ones trespassing on my property." I stepped onto the marble altar, the heels of my shoes clicking with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. I stood between the trembling groom and the hysterical bride, effectively taking the place of the minister. The room was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the ragged breathing of my father, Marcus. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and confusion, his eyes darting from my face to the leather portfolio I had placed on the lectern. He wanted to stop me, he wanted to drag me away, but the presence of the hotel security guards, who were now looking at me with deference rather than aggression, held him frozen in place. I opened the portfolio. The sound of the leather parting was sharp and distinct. I pulled out the first document, a heavy piece of paper with a raised seal. I held it up, turning slowly so that both the family on the stage and the guests in the audience could see it. "Let us start with the foundation of your lies, Marcus," I said, my voice projected clearly through the microphone I had taken from the stunned minister. "You have spent years telling everyone, including the Huntingtons, that you are a real estate mogul. You bragged about the family estate on Peachtree Lane. You called it your ancestral home." I looked at Courtney, who was clutching her bouquet so hard the flowers were snapping. "Courtney, do you remember when you told me that I didn't belong in that house? Do you remember saying that I was just a guest in your future empire? Well, I have news for you. Marcus doesn't own that house." I turned to my father. "This is the property deed for 42 Peachtree Lane." The owner listed is not Marcus Jenkins, it is OZ Real Estate Trust. And the sole beneficiary of that trust is the man you just tried to assault in the lobby. Otis Jenkins. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Marcus turned a sickly shade of gray. That is right, Dad, I continued, flipping the page. You have been paying rent to your own father for 20 years, and according to this ledger, you are 3 months behind. You are not a landlord. You are a tenant. And as the new executor of the trust, I am afraid I have some bad news. Your lease is terminated, effective immediately. Marcus made a choking sound, clutching his chest. But I did not give him time to recover. I pulled out the second document. And then, there is the matter of your business, MJ Enterprises. You told Mr. Huntington that you were looking for investors for a European expansion. But the truth is, you were looking for a lifeline because your company is technically insolvent. I held up a stack of bank transfer records. Yesterday, the debt you owed to Centurion Capital was sold. It was purchased by a private holding company. My company. I looked Mr. Huntington in the eye. Sir, the man standing next to you does not own a company. He owns a massive liability. I now hold the note on every piece of equipment, every vehicle, and every future revenue stream of MJ Enterprises. If I wanted to, I could liquidate his entire life before the reception dinner is served. Mr. Huntington stepped away from Marcus as if he were contagious. He looked at his son-in-law to be Dion with pure disgust. But money is just money, I said, softening my voice deceptively. We can always make more money. But character loyalty, that is something you cannot buy. I turned my attention to Dion. He was shaking so hard his knees were knocking together. He knew what was coming. He pleaded with me with his eyes, a silent, desperate beg for mercy. But I remembered the way he had laughed when I was thrown out into the snow. I remembered the way he had stolen from the family to gamble. I pulled out the final piece of evidence. It was not a document. It was a series of high-resolution photographs. Courtney, I said, addressing the bride. You asked security to throw out the trash, but sometimes the trash is already standing at the altar with you. I handed the photos to her. Take a look. These were taken 3 nights ago. Dion told you he was at his bachelor party with the boys, but my private investigator found him somewhere else. Courtney looked at the photos. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open. She dropped the photos, and they scattered on the floor like autumn leaves. Everyone in the front row could see them. They were pictures of Dion entering a hotel room. And he was not alone. He was with a woman. I watched as Courtney slowly turned her head to look at the woman standing directly to her left. Her maid of honor. Sarah. Sarah turned pale, taking a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. You... Courtney whispered, her voice trembling with betrayal. You and Sarah Dion tried to grab her hand. Courtney, baby, wait, I can explain. She meant nothing. It was a mistake. I was stressed about the debt. A mistake! Courtney screamed, swinging her bouquet and hitting Dion in the face with it. You slept with my best friend in the hotel my father paid for. The room erupted into chaos. Sarah tried to run, but tripped over her dress. Dion was trying to shield his face from the assault of roses and baby's breath. I stepped back to the microphone. Mr. Huntington, I said calmly, I think you have a decision to make. Mr. Huntington did not hesitate. He walked over to the minister, grabbed the microphone from my hand, and shoved Dion so hard the groom fell off the altar steps. The wedding is off! Mr. Huntington roared, his voice booming with the authority of a man who controlled billions. Everyone get out. Get out now. There will be no marriage. My daughter is leaving, and if I ever see a member of the Jenkins family again, I will ruin you. He grabbed Courtney by the arm, dragging her away from Dion. Courtney was wailing, kicking her dress, screaming curses at Dion, at Sarah, and at me. I stood still in the eye of the storm, watching them crumble. It was finished. The house of cards had fallen. But Marcus was not done. My father stood alone on the altar. His investors were gone. His rich in-laws were leaving. His son was on the floor, His house was gone. His company was gone. His mind could not process the magnitude of the defeat. He needed to reject it. He needed to believe that this was all a trick. Lies. Marcus screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek. He pointed a shaking finger at me. It is all lies. She forged those papers. She is a liar. He looked frantically at the crowd, desperate for anyone to believe him. My father is not a billionaire, he screamed, his eyes bulging. He is a bricklayer. He is a nobody. He lived in a shack. He smells like poverty. How could he own this hotel? How could he own my house? It is impossible. He is a cripple. He is a useless, broken old man. Marcus laughed, a manic, terrifying sound. Look at him. Look at the old fool. He pointed to the back of the room where Otis was sitting in his wheelchair near the entrance. He can't even walk. He is nothing. I am the success story here. I am the one who built this family. Suddenly, the laughter in the room died. The murmuring stopped. All eyes turned to the back of the room. Grandpa Otis was moving. He placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair, the same hands that had laid bricks for 50 years, the same hands that had signed the checks that built this city. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed himself up. Marcus stopped screaming. His mouth hung open. Otis stood. He stood tall, his spine straight, his shoulders broad in his Italian suit. He adjusted his cufflinks. He took one step, then another. His gait was strong, steady, powerful. The cane he sometimes used was nowhere in sight. He walked down the center aisle. The guests parted for him like the Red Sea. He didn't look at them. He looked only at his son. The only sound was the rhythmic thud of his polished shoes on the carpet. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of judgment approaching. He reached the altar. He walked past Dayon, who was cowering on the floor. He walked past me, giving me a small, proud nod. He stopped in front of the microphone. He looked at Marcus, who was shrinking, looking smaller and smaller with every second. Otis reached out and adjusted the microphone stand. He leaned in, his voice deep and resonant, filling every corner of the silent ballroom. You are right about one thing, Marcus Otis said. I was a bricklayer. I built walls. I built foundations. I built homes for families who loved each other. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. But you, my son, you only know how to build facades, and today I am here to tear them all down. The silence in the ballroom was heavier than the marble pillars holding up the ceiling. Every eye was fixed on the man standing at the microphone. My grandfather, the man who had spent the last decade in a wheelchair wearing thrift store clothes and eating soup from a can. Now he stood like a titan, his silhouette framed by the stained glass windows behind the altar. My father Marcus looked like he was shrinking physically. He was shaking his head slowly, mouthing the word no over and over again, his brain refusing to accept the reality standing before him. Otis gripped the microphone stand with hands that were weathered and scarred, the hands of a worker. He looked out at the sea of wealthy faces, at the Huntingtons, at the bankers, at the socialites. He did not blink. You called me a bricklayer, Marcus Otis said, his voice booming without shouting. You said I smelled like poverty. You were ashamed to introduce me to your friends because you thought my calloused hands would stain your pristine reputation. Otis raised his right hand, palm open. Look at these hands. Yes, they are rough. Yes, they have laid bricks. But do you know where I laid them? He pointed a finger toward the massive window that overlooked the Atlanta skyline. I laid the bricks for the First National Bank Tower. I poured the concrete for the foundation of the Huntington building where your father-in-law has his corner office. I framed the steel for this very hotel in 1975. He turned back to Marcus, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. They do not call me Otis the beggar in the boardroom, Marcus. They call me Otis the builder. And for 50 years I have been the silent partner in almost every major development in this city. You wanted to be part of the elite. You wanted to sit at the high table. But you never realized that the table, the chairs, and the floor you are standing on were built by the father you despised. A gasp rippled through the room. Mr. Huntington stepped forward, his face pale. Otis Jenkins. Mr. Huntington whispered, his voice trembling. The Otis Jenkins, the founder of OZ Holdings. I thought you were a myth. I thought you were dead. I am very much alive, Charles Otis said, glancing at him. And I am sorry my granddaughter had to buy your debt just to get your attention. He turned his focus back to Marcus. My father was clutching his chest, tears of panic streaming down his face. Dad, Marcus choked out. Dad, please, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? If you had known I was worth $4 billion, you would have treated me like a king. Otis interrupted, his voice cutting like a knife. That is exactly why I didn't tell you. Otis stepped closer to his son, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. I gave you a test, Marcus. It was a simple test. For 10 years I pretended to be weak. I pretended to be poor. I wanted to see if my son loved me, or if he only loved what I could give him. I wanted to see if you had a heart, or just a calculator where your soul should be. He gestured to me standing in the front row. Your daughter Zara. She thought I had nothing. She thought I was a burden. And yet, she came every week. She washed my clothes. She bought me medicine with her own grocery money. She pushed my wheelchair through the snow while you sat inside drinking vintage wine. She loved the bricklayer. You only wanted the billionaire. Otis took a deep breath, standing tall. You chose money, Marcus. You chose status over blood. You chose appearances over humanity. You threw your own father and daughter out into a blizzard because we didn't match your decor. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a fountain pen. He pulled the portfolio I had left on the lectern toward him. So today, I am granting your wish. You want to be defined by money. Fine. Let us talk about money. He opened the ledger. I gave you a company. I gave you a house. I gave you a car. I did it quietly through shell companies hoping you would succeed. But you squandered it. You let your son gamble it away. You leveraged my generosity to feed your vanity. Otis signed the document on the lectern with a flourish. As the chairman of OZ Holdings, I am exercising the insolvency clause on all your loans. I am seizing the assets. The house on Peachtree Lane is no longer yours. The cars are no longer yours. MJ. Enterprises is dissolved as of this moment. No, Marcus screamed, falling to his knees. You can't do this. I will be on the street. I will have nothing. You will have exactly what you started with, Otis said coldly. You have your health. You have your arrogance. And you have the lesson I should have taught you 30 years ago. Otis looked at the document one last time. And regarding my personal estate, the inheritance you have been waiting for, the billions you thought were your birthright. Marcus looked up, a glimmer of hope in his desperate eyes. Dad, please. I am your only son. Otis closed the portfolio. I am making a change to my will today. My entire estate, all $4.2 billion, and the controlling interest in my real estate empire is being placed into an irrevocable trust. He pointed at me. The sole trustee and beneficiary is my granddaughter Zara. But there is a condition. The money is not for yachts or mansions. It is to fund the Zara Jenkins Foundation. The crowd murmured. Foundation. Otis looked down at Marcus. It will be a non-profit organization dedicated to providing housing for the elderly who have been abandoned by their families. It will build shelters. It will build homes. And the first shelter we build will be on the plot of land where your mansion currently stands. Marcus collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. He was broken. He was destitute. The realization hit him that he had held the keys to the kingdom in his hand for years, and he had thrown them away because they looked like old brass. Otis stepped back from the microphone. He looked at me. Come, Zara, he said, his voice softening. We have a lot of work to do, and I believe we have overstayed our welcome at this party. He turned his back on his weeping son and walked toward the exit. I picked up my clutch and followed him. I did not look back at the altar. I did not look back at the man who was now sobbing into the carpet. I walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned guests, past the ruined wedding cake, and into the lobby where the world was waiting for the new heir of OZ Holdings. The ballroom emptied with the speed of a sinking ship. The guests who had been whispering and drinking champagne just moments ago now scrambled for the exits, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. I watched as Mr. Huntington ushered his weeping daughter toward the side door. Courtney looked back, once her mascara running down her face in black streaks, but she didn't look at Dayon. She looked at the diamonds around my neck with a mixture of hatred and longing, realizing that the sister she had mocked was now the woman who owned the ground she walked on. Dayon tried to follow them. He scrambled up from the floor, his tuxedo torn and stained. "Mr. Huntington, wait!" Dayon shouted, stumbling over a fallen chair. "We can fix this. I can explain. It is just a misunderstanding." "Security," I said softly into the microphone. Two large guards intercepted Dayon before he could reach the double doors. They didn't ask him to leave. They grabbed him by the back of his jacket and the seat of his pants. Dayon kicked and screamed, flailing his limbs like a child having a tantrum, but they dragged him backward across the polished floor. His fingernails scrabbled against the marble, leaving no mark, a perfect metaphor for his impact on the world. The doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off his wails, and suddenly the room was very quiet. It was just me, Grandpa Otis, and my father. Marcus was still on his knees at the foot of the altar. The adrenaline that had fueled his denial had drained away, leaving only a hollow, trembling shell of a man. He looked around the empty ballroom at the uneaten food, the wilting flowers, and the wreckage of his ambitions. Then he looked up at Otis. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "You can't do this. You can't leave me with nothing. I am your son." Otis looked down at him. His face was not angry. It was tired. It was the face of a man who had spent a lifetime building a legacy, only to watch his own blood try to burn it down. "I am not leaving you with nothing," Marcus Otis said, his voice echoing in the silence. "I am leaving you with the consequences of your own choices. You built this reality. I am just letting you live in it." Marcus crawled forward on his knees. He reached out and grabbed the hem of Otis's expensive trousers. He buried his face in the fabric, sobbing. "Please, Dad. I am sorry. I was wrong. I was stressed. I was trying to impress them for the family. I did it for us. Give me one more chance, just one more. I will change. I will be the son you wanted. I will work for you. I will sweep the floors. Just don't cut me off, please." Otis stood still. He didn't kick Marcus away, but he didn't reach down to comfort him either. He just watched the display of pathetic desperation with a detached sadness. "It is too late for apologies," Marcus Otis said. "You had 10 years of chances. Every time I came to your house in that old wheelchair, that was a chance. Every time I asked to sit at your table, that was a chance. You rejected them all." Otis pulled his leg away from Marcus's grip. He turned his head and looked at me. "Zara," he said gently. I stepped down from the altar. "You are the head of the foundation now," Otis continued. "You are the trustee of the estate. The assets, the house, the future of this family, it is all in your hands." He gestured to the man weeping on the floor. "What happens to him is up to you." My father's head snapped up. He looked at me. His eyes were wide and red-rimmed. For the first time in my life, I saw hope in his eyes when he looked at me, but it wasn't the hope of a father proud of his daughter. It was the hope of a predator looking for a weakness. He thought I was soft. He thought he could manipulate me. "Zara," baby Marcus pleaded, scrambling on his knees to face me. "You know me. You know I love you. I was hard on you because I wanted you to be tough. I wanted you to succeed." He reached out his hands, the same hands that had locked the door on me in the blizzard. "Tell him, Zara. Tell him we are family. We can work this out. You can live in the house. You can have the master suite. We can run the company together. Just tell him to stop this." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat dripping down his face. I remembered the way he had laughed when Courtney threw soup on Grandpa. I remembered the text message telling me to stay away. I remembered the cold wind on my face last night. I walked over to the side of the stage where my clutch was sitting. Next to it was a bundle of fabric. It was the old tattered wool coat that Grandpa Otis had worn yesterday, the one with the patch on the elbow, the one that smelled of mothballs and tomato soup. I picked it up. The wool was rough against my fingers. I walked back to Marcus. He was smiling nervously, thinking I was going to help him up, thinking I was going to offer him a check or a key. "You are right, Dad," I said, my voice steady and calm. "It is cold outside." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Yes, yes, it is. It is freezing. And yesterday when you threw us out, you didn't care if we froze?" I continued. "You told us to get out and die." The smile froze on his face. "But I am not you," I said. "I don't want you to die. I just want you to understand." I threw the coat at him. It landed on his head, covering him in the smell of the poverty he despised. He pulled it off, looking at the rags in his hands with confusion. "Keep it," I said, cold. "It is a good coat. It kept Grandpa warm for 10 years while you ignored him. Now it can keep you warm." Marcus stared at the coat, then at me. "Zara, what are you doing?" I signaled to the security guards. "Escort Mr. Jenkins and his son off the premises," I commanded, "and make sure they don't take anything that belongs to the hotel." "No!" Marcus screamed as the guards grabbed him. "Zara, you can't do this. I am your father." I turned my back on him. I walked over to Grandpa Otis and took the handles of his wheelchair even though he didn't need it anymore. It was a habit of love. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said, not looking back. "Try not to scratch the paint on the doors on your way out." The guards dragged him away, his screams fading as they hauled him through the lobby. 10 minutes later, I stood by the massive glass window of the ballroom, looking down at the street entrance. It was snowing again. The wind was howling, whipping the white flakes into a frenzy. Down on the sidewalk, 2 figures were standing under the street lamp. Marcus and Dion. They had no car. Their phones had been confiscated as company property. They had no wallets. I watched as Marcus wrapped the old tattered wool coat around his shoulders. It was too small for him. He tried to button it with shaking hands. Dion was huddled next to him, shivering in his torn tuxedo, blowing into his hands to keep warm. They looked up at the hotel. They looked up at the warm, golden light spilling from the penthouse window where I stood. They were standing exactly where Grandpa and I had stood 24 hours ago. The cycle was complete. The lesson was learned. Grandpa Otis rolled up beside me. He looked down at the shivering figures. "Do you feel bad?" he asked quietly. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I thought about the years of neglect. I thought about the cruelty. I thought about the soup on his coat. I looked at my grandfather and smiled. "No, Grandpa," I said. "I don't feel bad. I feel like justice is finally served. And besides, I gave him a coat. That is more than he ever gave us." 30 days is a long time in the world of business, but it is an eternity when your entire life has been turned upside down. 1 month after the wedding that never happened, I walked into the main boardroom of OZ Holdings. This time, I did not have to sneak past security. I did not have to pretend to be an investor named ZJ. I walked in as Zara Jenkins, the CEO. The room was filled with men and women in gray suits, people who managed millions of dollars before breakfast. But when I entered, they stopped talking. They stood up. At the head of the table sat Grandpa Otis. He was not wearing a suit today. He was wearing a comfortable cardigan, looking every bit the retired grandfather he deserved to be. When he saw me, he smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated pride. He tapped the empty leather chair next to him, the seat reserved for the chairman. He was passing the torch. I sat down, opened the portfolio that held the future of our empire, and called the meeting to order. For the first time in history, the board of OZ Holdings was led by a black woman, and the silence in the room was not one of doubt, but of respect. While I was reviewing the quarterly projections for our new affordable housing initiative, a very different scene was playing out across town. In the humid, noisy kitchen of a mid-range hotel near the airport, a man was struggling with a heavy pot of grease. My father Marcus was no longer wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a stained white apron and a hairnet. The man who had once screamed at waiters for bringing him the wrong vintage of wine was now scraping leftovers off plates. It was part of the plea deal I had arranged. To avoid prison time for the fraud and embezzlement within his company, Marcus had agreed to work off his debt. Every dollar he earned went directly to the Zara Jenkins Foundation. He looked older now. The arrogance had been scrubbed away by the harsh reality of minimum wage labor. His hands, once manicured, were chapped and red from the hot water and soap. Next to him, mopping the floor with a sullen expression, was Dayon. The golden child had lost his luster. There were no more Porsches, no more Rolexes, no more bailouts. Dion was learning the value of a dollar the hard way. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to gamble during his lunch break, but without a smartphone and with his wages garnished, he had nothing to bet with but his own misery. They argued constantly, blaming each other for their fall, trapped in a prison of their own making. They were finally building something, but it wasn't a legacy, it was just a clean floor. And then there was Courtney. The socialite who had terrified clerks at Tiffany's was learning that influence is a fragile currency. After the disaster at the wedding, the Huntingtons had done what wealthy families do best to protect their brand. They cut off the infected limb. Courtney was disowned. Without her father's credit cards and her mother's connections, she was just another girl in a city that didn't care about her last name. I saw her online profile recently. She was live streaming from a small, cluttered studio apartment, trying to sell her used designer clothes to strangers. She looked tired. She was holding up the very purse she had once used to hit my grandfather's wheelchair, begging for a bid of $50. The comment section was empty. Her audience had moved on just as her fiancé had. But I did not dwell on them. I did not visit the hotel kitchen to gloat. I did not buy Courtney's used shoes to humiliate her. I didn't need to. Their punishment was their life. My reward was mine. The year flew by, and before I knew it, the snow was falling again. It was Christmas Eve. The penthouse was warm, smelling of cinnamon and pine. A 12-foot tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments that Grandpa and I had made by hand years ago, mixed in with sparkling crystal bulbs. Outside, the wind howled through the skyscrapers of Manhattan, a reminder of the storm we had weathered exactly 1 year ago. But inside, the fire was crackling. I walked over to the window, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. Grandpa Otis was sitting in his favorite armchair, looking out at the city lights. He wasn't in his wheelchair. He had been walking with a cane for months now, getting stronger every day. I handed him the mug. He took it, his hands warm and steady. "Merry Christmas, Grandpa," I said, sitting on the ottoman beside him. He looked at me, his eyes twinkling. "Merry Christmas, sweet pea. It is a bit better than last year, isn't it?" I laughed. "Just a bit. Last year we were freezing on a doorstep. This year we own the building." Otis took a sip of cocoa and looked at the reflection of the room in the glass. "You know, Zara, a lot of people would have used this power to destroy them completely. You could have sent Marcus to jail. You could have sued Courtney for every penny. But you didn't. You showed them mercy, even if it was a tough kind of mercy." I looked down at the city, watching the tiny cars moving through the snow. I thought about the anger I used to carry. It was heavy. It was exhausting. Letting it go felt like taking off a wet wool coat. "I didn't do it for them, Grandpa," I said softly. "I did it for me. Hating them kept me tied to them. Punishing them kept me in their world. I wanted to build my own world." Grandpa nodded, reaching out to pat my hand. "You have Zara. You have built a life that is honest. That is the only wealth that matters." We sat there in silence for a long time watching the snowfall. I thought about the people watching this story, the people who might be standing on their own cold doorsteps right now, feeling rejected and small. I wanted to tell them that winter doesn't last forever. I wanted to tell them that their value isn't determined by how their family treats them. I turned back to the warmth of the room, to the only family I needed. The sweetest revenge is not hurting them, I thought, smiling as I clinked my mug against my grandfather's. It is not making them suffer. The sweetest revenge is letting them watch you shine from a place they can never reach. It is being so happy, so whole, and so successful that their absence is no longer a wound, but a relief. Grandpa Otis stood up, leaning on his cane. Come on, Zara. Winston made dinner, and I believe there is a gift under the tree with your name on it. I stood up and took his arm. We walked toward the dining room together, leaving the cold night behind us forever. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to fight for your place in the world, or if you found your true family in unexpected places, let me know in the comments. And remember, no matter how cold it gets, you always have the power to build your own fire. The downfall of Marcus and Dayon teaches us a powerful lesson. True wealth is never defined by the car you drive or the mansion you rent, but by the integrity you keep when you think no one is watching. They chase the illusion of status, sacrificing their own blood for validation, only to discover that the people they discarded held the keys to their kingdom. In the end, dignity will always outlast arrogance. Never let anyone make you feel small because of your circumstances. Your character is a currency that never depreciates, and eventually the world will pay you exactly what you are worth. If you believe that justice always finds a way, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of sweet revenge, and share this video with someone who needs to see the underdog win.